Hello, hello. Welcome to another subscriber and NFL lineup review. So this is going to be going over NFL Week 4. Pretty wild week. My name is James McCool. I am the owner of Patriot.ghost.io. I run all the models and everything there for all the sports across the entire length of the year, all the major sports. And today we're going to be looking at NFL. Yo, what's up, Bursing? How you doing, man? Um, Usually what I try to do is go through the my own lineups and then also go over the lineups that ended up winning the slate. We're going to be doing that, and then we are also going to be looking at some subscriber lineups for the site from the community that were posted into the Discord. So the goal here is to kind of look and see where we went right, where we went wrong, talk through a couple of the different projections that maybe could have been better, could have been worse, talk over my process, talk over what won people money, and try to maybe improve on some subscriber lineups, or at least see what the community was all about. How you doing, Box? How you doing, dude? Hopefully everyone here is doing well today. Sweating out some really cool doubleheader Monday Night Football action, which is tight. We're all about that. Let's see. I'm going to pull up the contests real quick that I entered. I had a really good sweat in the SPY this week. I was second place for a while, up until the Cowboys explosion. I was really sweating out a really nice five-figure week, but alas, didn't quite get there, and it is what it is. So we're not going to dwell on that, even though it is a bit of a bummer. But here's the SPY. All right. So let's talk through a couple of the different stacks. So going into the week, like when I was running through numbers, the main things that stuck out to me were Seattle, Houston, and Baltimore. And those were like the first three stacks that I really thought that I would want based on a couple different things. Seattle came out as the top overall projected stack. You can see it here on the screen. This is just these are the outcomes and the range of outcomes from week 4, which you can find in the backlogs folder that is in the Discord. Russell Wilson, Tyler Lockett, and DK Metcalf were the top overall projected stack, followed by Jared Goff, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods, and then Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup. It's no big surprise that Seattle would come out on top again. They're usually the top projected stack just because they're actually throwing the ball quite a bit this year. Russell Wilson is obviously very good, and Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf both have similar ranges of outcomes in terms of their median projections, whereas DK Metcalf's is probably a little bit higher on the ceiling end, and Tyler Lockett has a little bit of a better floor. So those guys usually project somewhere around 20 fantasy points. It's no surprise that that stack is the top overall projected. I don't think that I was alone in that. Followed by that is Jared Goff, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods, where that stack, I mean, it made sense that it was going to be a very highly projected stack simply because the Rams were projected to score over 30 real life points. And whenever you have a team that's projected over that many real life points, it's always going to project well. Since you're usually, at least the way that I build projections, you're building them top down. You're taking a team total and you're trying to break it down then into touchdowns. And then you break that down into where the touchdowns go to the players, and then you put in baselines and blah. So Vegas totals have a lot to do with projections. Franchise, you are late. How dare you be late to the stream? Followed by that is going to be Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup, which a Dallas stack is what won everybody all the money. That game stack with the Cleveland Browns with OBJ. We'll get into that a little bit. I thought that Dallas was going to have a little bit of a down week, and they were indeed having a down week until the fourth quarter when basically everything went fucking crazy for them. They scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and just went absolutely bonkers. So it is what it is, and that was something that won a lot of people money. I know the subscribers were on it. It was a top 3 projected stack one way or another, so it's not like it projected badly. There were basically 4 stacks that projected very well. Seattle, the Rams, the Cowboys, and Buffalo. All those stacks were projected over 60 fantasy points as a combination. with the Buffalo stack looking like the one that was the best value. Why is the Rams above Dallas? Because of the implied total, I'm pretty sure. I was a little bit lower on Michael Gallup, I think. I think that it was because Jared Goff, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods have such a higher portion of the targets in the air yards for the Rams than Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper, since there are so many mouths to feed in Dallas. The projections overall liked them a little bit more, but like they're all basically projected for 63 fantasy points. All three of those stacks were. So the one that was so much farther above the rest was that Seattle stack. Moving down the list a little bit, I really, really liked the Baltimore stack. I always just go with Lamar Jackson and one of Mark Andrews or Marquise Brown. I thought that stack was going to come in way, way lower than it should have off of a bad week off of Monday Night Football, and it did. They were all only 5% owned. And then Deshaun Watson, Will Fuller, and Brandon Cooks. This stack kind of looked like it was one of the best like value stacks, just because Brandon Cooks was so cheap, and Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller can combine and do really, really well together when they are allowed to pass. We'll get to the Bill Bryant thing here in a second, but really, really liked that Houston stack, really liked Baltimore, and really liked Seattle. Um, I was off of the Rams just because I kind of felt weird about the way that that team runs. Um, Once you think you've figured them out, they kind of go to a different thing. Sean McVay really likes to switch things up, so I really didn't like the Rams all that much. I was fine with Dallas. I thought they were going to have a down week simply because the Browns want to run the ball significantly more often than they want to pass the ball. I didn't expect an offensive explosion from the Browns. I thought there would be a relatively good game. I just didn't think that it was going to be something that had them scoring 40 points and then having the Cowboys have to come from behind and score about 1,000,000 points in the fourth quarter. So it is what it is. Um, let's see. Let's go over into projections really quick and just talk about that, and then we will get into the actual contests and my lineups and stuff like that. It's weird seeing Nick Foles and not seeing Philly. Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. Alvin Kamara, highest projected overall on the slate, followed by Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and then Ezekiel Elliott and Deshaun Watson. Basically, the top position players were Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins, and Stephon Diggs. Hopkins and Lockett both did really, really bad. Lockett just like straight up did not produce very well at all. It was Seattle that had a down week, not Dallas. Dallas was having a down week until that fourth quarter, but they just decided to score 3 touchdowns in the fourth. Can I review all 150 of your Millie lineups? Hell no. That would take like years. Maybe if I like do private coaching, I can do stuff like that, but not today, man. Not today. It sounds awful. Overall, I think the projections were pretty good. Baker Mayfield projected better than he actually scored. That's just because Cleveland decided to use um, Jarvis Landry to throw that touchdown to OBJ, and then OBJ had a 50-yard rushing touchdown. That's a weird one. Dak Prescott finished very, very well. Russell Wilson finished really, really well. Kyler Murray, I don't think, did too terribly with his rushing, but he ended up not great. Sean Watson did fine. Ezekiel Elliott was underwhelming simply because fucking they didn't do anything until the fourth quarter, and then that was all Dak Prescott in the passing game. Josh Allen did pretty well. Lamar Jackson did pretty well, and Alvin Kamara did not do very well. I did talk a lot about the questions that you needed to ask about Alvin Kamara when you were building your lineups for this week. Um, it was it wasn't that Kamara was a bad play. Like he was a good play. You can see that he was still a good play in terms of leverage, even at a very high ownership. Even if you make this 50% owned, like he still ends up being a pretty neutral play. The problem that you came up with was when you're thinking through any kind of a super chalk play like Alvin Kamara or like Miles Sanders the week before or like Derrick Henry the week before that, like when you're thinking through these really, really popular plays that are going to be somewhere between 30 and 50% owned, you're not really thinking about them in a vacuum. You're thinking about their position. So when you look at the running back range of outcomes and you think about Alvin Kamara as a play, first you think, all right, well, what are the ways that he can fail? And you think about him getting vultured for touchdowns, or you think about the Saints not scoring any points, or you think about Detroit coming up with a game plan that specifically spies away Alvin Kamara with a linebacker. Like there are ways that Alvin Kamara doesn't get there, but for the most part, you could reasonably project 12 to 15 carries and legitimately 8 to 12 targets. Like it wasn't hard to see him coming out of this with 20 fantasy points. So that wasn't really the question. Usually that's the first question you ask is how are the ways that Alvin Kamara can't get there or whatever chalk play it is doesn't get there. And then if they have a whole bunch of ways that they can't get there, then you think about fading them on that merit. That wasn't the situation here. I thought Kamara was basically a lock for 20 fantasy points. So then you have to think about the rest of the position where you say, okay, so Kamara projects well. He's probably going to get there. But what about the rest of the position? Are there other running backs on this slate that can match his projected outcomes, that can match his range of outcomes, that can end up beating him and making him not a top 5 running back on the slate? And of course, there were on this week, right? Like Ezekiel Elliott was in a really, really good spot. I thought he was going to be significantly less owned than Alvin Kamara. Dalvin Cook was in a really good spot against a Houston team that allows a lot of explosive runs. Mike Davis, even at 5,700, I thought was kind of like a shoe-in for 20 plus fantasy points, and he missed out on like 3 touchdowns too. You can keep going on the list. You could have made the argument for Darrell Henderson in terms of his workload the weeks before. We'll talk about Joe Mixon here in a sec. I didn't actually like him all that much. Nick Chubb on a team that wants to run the ball 76% of the time in the red zone. Kenyon Drake on a team that is up against Carolina defense that has gotten shredded by the run in the first couple weeks. Like there were reasons to think that Alvin Kamara was going to get outscored by multiple running backs on this slate. So I ended up fading Alvin Kamara just because I have a really high risk tolerance, and I think that that was the right thing to do. I faded Derrick Henry when he was 50% owned. I faded Miles Sanders. Like I just never really want anybody who's going to be somewhere between 35 and 50% owned on my lineups. I think that there's a lot more equity in not having them. But for people who are more risk averse, those were the questions that you needed to ask. And I think that Alvin Kamara was still a good play on this slate, even if he ended up not producing very well. Like it's just he was a good play, but there were other plays that were comparable at the position. It's not like the week before that where you had like, or no, it was 2 weeks ago where DeAndre Hopkins or Devontae Adams or something like that. He projected so much better and had such a better market share and air yards and like baselines than any other wide receiver that it was really hard to justify fading him. You like Cook, it's a bias why I feel he shouldn't be performing the way he is. I think Cook's really good. Cook is connected to the Vikings offense, though. He's only as good as they let him be. You don't like holding hands with public chalk plays. It's COVID season. Too many terms out there. That's funny. It's just when somebody's 50% owned, it's just really, really hard to justify playing them in large field GPPs. If there's under 100 entries in a contest, then yeah, you just play the chalk and you hope that other people make mistakes. You only pivot in one spot. But for me, playing the spy and playing the power sweep and playing the Millie Maker, like those kinds of things, there's so much more equity in fading a 50% owned play and trying to pivot and trying to figure out the way to take advantage of the 50% of people that had that player in their lineups. I ended up locking the Lions defense. Well, no, I had 2 out of 3 Lions defense. We'll talk about that, but that was the way that I was going to try to leverage it. Obviously, it didn't work out because the Saints scored 1 million points, but everyone knows what the Vikings will do, and they still don't. They have looked better. Like the Vikings have looked better these last 2 weeks. The first couple weeks they just got embarrassed, and they've looked a lot better these last 2 weeks. They're throwing the ball a little bit deeper down the field. They are utilizing Dalvin Cook in better ways. So I think that the Vikings have probably righted the ship. Anyway, that's like just a little bit of game theory things. I want to talk a little bit more about Alvin Kamara and that kind of a situation. When you have somebody who's going to be that highly owned, there's usually a lot more equity in fading them. Alvin Kamara this week, especially at the running back position where there were a lot of running backs that I thought could at least match his score for less ownership. I think that's a pretty easy decision to make. Can we talk about Drake versus Mixon play? Yeah, sure. Let's talk about that. So let's pull up the running back expected fantasy points per game. Right. So this is a measure of season long efficiency and season long usage for running backs. What it's doing is it's saying, all right, here's the average rushing attempts here's the amount of snaps that a player averages. Here's the amount of rushing attempts. Here's the amount of targets that they average per game. How many touchdowns they have, how many expected touchdowns they have on the year, how many touchdowns they are missing based on expected touchdowns minus touchdowns, their actual fantasy points per game, and their expected fantasy points per game. So after explaining all of that, what we're doing here is we're trying to say, all right, these running backs, I have it sorted by expected fantasy points per game. These are the running backs from top to bottom that have the most opportunity so far on the year, that should be doing this well through the year. Aaron Jones has the best opportunity on the year so far, 30.42 expected fantasy points per game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the sixth best at 23. He's missing a lot of touchdowns. He's only gotten one. He should have four. Keep going down the list. Eventually, you get to Kenyon Drake, right? Where Kenyon Drake is supposed to be averaging 15.64. He's averaging 18 rushing attempts and 2 targets per game. Those 2 targets per game are obviously shitty. But the more important thing is that he was averaging like 5, almost 6 targets per game last year. Now he's only averaging 2. We go a bit farther down still, and we get to Joe Mixon, who was only averaging expected fantasy points per game of 14.04. And he was only in on 60% of the snaps. So there's like some concerning usage things here where he didn't have any touchdowns. He should have had 2 touchdowns. He does have some goal line work. 17 rushes per game and only 3 targets per game. The big thing with Joe Mixon has always been if he's going to get the receiving work, then he is going to end up having a really, really good role in that offense. The problem is that he hasn't been getting the rushing work or the receiving work. And when I was going through my lineups and when I was going through projections, I decided that I didn't want any Joe Mixon simply because I didn't want to have exposure to him if he was not going to be getting the targets and if he was not going to be a massive part of that offense. I liked the Cincinnati passing attack more. I liked Cincinnati-Jacksonville passing game. I did actually end up stacking them. But the reason why I didn't use Joe Mixon is just because his opportunity really hasn't been that good, and he was projected to be relatively popular. He was supposed to be like 17% owned before the chest injury thing. So he ended up with a receiving touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns, 30 receiving yards, 151 rushing yards, 6 receptions on 8 targets or something like that. It was the best game that he has had all season by not even close. I mean, he basically doubled his general opportunity that he has been averaging on the year. And he had a whole bunch of touchdown regression that came through for him, and he ended up scoring 3 touchdowns. Basically everything broke right for him. But to say that he should have been a really popular play, it was kind of the same thing as David Johnson. People wanted to play David Johnson this week, and I didn't really understand why people wanted to play David Johnson. Joe Mixon at 5,800, if he was only 5K, that's a different question. You get somebody who has 20 opportunities per game for 5K, that's fine. Myles Gaskin was probably a little bit better of a play than Joe Mixon was, but Joe Mixon behind a really, really bad offensive line on a team that passes 75% of the time when they get into the red zone is a pass-first team. It just didn't really make sense to me. I wouldn't have gone to Mixon. Kenyon Drake was getting basically the same opportunity at 6K and getting more of the running back work. He was in on more of the snaps. He should have had more touchdowns. He had more expected touchdowns. When you look at them next to each other, technically Drake is the better play, but Mixon wasn't really that far behind. The problem was that on this slate, going to either one of them was kind of all right, if you're going to play Joe Mixon, then you are actively avoiding Mike Davis, who was the best running back play on the slate, Alvin Kamara, who was the second best running back play on the slate, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler, Chris Carson. there was at least 8 running backs that you probably put ahead of Joe Mixon if you are looking at the math and if you're looking at the baselines. So if, on the other hand, you look at Joe Mixon and say, oh, well, he's a big play threat and he's really good, and I think that he's a good player and he should be getting more work, then yeah, I guess that you could probably play him. But I don't work off of that kind of narrative. I don't really work off of what I see in games. I don't really watch sports anymore. So that kind of thing doesn't really affect me. When I go through the math, like Joe Mixon was not somebody that I would have played unless I was doing like an MME. If I had like 100 lineups, then I probably end up on some Joe Mixon just because he is probably a top 10 running back play on the slate, but he's not a top 5 running back play on the slate for me. And I usually like to have a really tight core of running backs. I don't really like to go through and ramp up my volatility at running back. I prefer to get that at wide receiver and tight end. So that's the spiel on Joe Mixon. I don't think that he was an incredible play. I don't think that he was a terrible play at the ownership that he came in at. I did have him projected for like 16 fantasy points. It wasn't like he was projected as dog shit, but he wasn't projected super well. And I think the opportunity leading up to that game, like for him to have as much opportunity and as many carries and as many targets and as many touchdowns as he did, I don't know how you can project that. I really don't. But people did and ended up winning for it, which is great for them. I was not on that play, but that's okay. I have been wrong before and I will be wrong again in the future at some point. Predicting the future is really hard, man. Anyway, let's jump into a couple things here where we are going to break down the SPY and we're going to break down the Millie Maker. I think that both of those contests had basically the same thing in terms of the winner. So 254 for the winner on the Millie Maker and 235 for the winner of the SPY. You didn't get Mike Davis because he was negative on LevX? Dude, you got I said Mike Davis like 1,000 times through the week. I said that Mike Davis was the easiest play on the week. And sometimes, like, even when the LevX is wrong, like you just play the player because he's the best running back play of the week. Oh, what's up, Tribe? How you doing, dude? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're thriving with you and your family. And with your defense projections, do you rank the weakness of the opposing line? No, I don't, because I mean, when you try to do things like that, it's kind of like when you break down hitter versus pitches in baseball. Like once you're getting down that low and once you're getting down that far into the granular aspect of trying to project forward, things get super convoluted and you start kind of overfitting your model to certain things. So I don't really care that much about opposing a line. I care a lot more about defensive pressures. I care more about how often the opposing quarterback gets sacked, and I care about team total. But those are really the only 3 things that I care about with defense. Let's see. So for the SPY, I was in second place in the SPY for a while. I was working my way up. I was about 3 points back from first place until about 8 minutes left of the Cowboys game. And then all of the Cowboys things just like went crazy and it knocked me way back. But Cowboys stacks ended up winning it. The winner of the SPY went with Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, brought it back with Odell Beckham Jr., had Alvin Kamara, Mike Davis, Adam Troutman, and Joe Mixon with the Bengals defense. So like I said, I mean, Dallas projected well. They were the 3rd best projected stack on the slate for me. Alvin Kamara makes sense. Mike Davis makes sense. Best 2 running back plays on the slate. Not hard to do. OBJ ended up being 19% owned. He was pretty chalky, so that also makes sense. I think that you can probably get there pretty easily if you're stacking up Dallas. Trotman ended up being 21% owned in the SPY just because he was free and he was expected to be like the Saints were like, oh yeah, we got to get this kid involved, and then he literally wasn't involved at all. Joe Mixon, we just talked about. I didn't think he was that good to play. He was only 3% owned in the SPY, and it ended up paying out super dividends for people who had him. And the Bengals defense actually rated really well in the defensive rankings. So I can see how you get to this lineup. It's not hard at all. Like as soon as you went with a Dallas stack with OBJ and then brought it back with Alvin Kamara and Mike Davis, we can actually go and recreate this, right? Like you can go into the range of outcomes and you can go to the stacks and you can just kind of start building things out. Dak Prescott, Mike Davis, Mara, Cooper, Odell Beckham Jr. I don't remember what this kid's name is. Adam Trotman. Yep. Fuck. Adam Trotman. Joe Mixon. And then the Bengals defense. So, yeah, I mean, this used up all 50K of the slate, or all 50K of your salary. And it ended up like, when you look at this and you look at these averages, like, this is a good lineup. Projected to hit over 20 fantasy points for every player, 46.8% of the time. And that's brought down a lot by Adam Trotman. 3x almost 60% of the time, 4x almost 34% of the time. Still a positive LevX, like still not super leverage, not super negative. The projection looked pretty good, 158.27. And that, again, is even with Adam Trotman looking bad. And the ownership only won 10%. So when you recreate this, like, yeah, it makes sense. You could go in here, and if you just started with this whole thing, right, and then put in the Bengals defense, and then put in Adam Trotman, and you have enough money for somebody here, probably Joe Mixon, you can get there. Like, that's not super wild. So this is something that you can do when you like are recapping the slate. You can go in and you can put it into this tool, and you can see that it projected pretty well. Like, you could have built that using the range of outcomes. So the time QB gets sacked has something to do with the weakness of the O-line. I think that the amount that a quarterback gets sacked per pass attempt has a lot more to do with the quarterback themselves. Like, Marcus Mariota takes a lot of sacks. Deshaun Watson takes a lot of sacks. Kyler Murray takes a lot of sacks. Russell Wilson takes a lot of sacks. Just because, like, Russell Wilson is notorious for not wanting to throw the ball away. He doesn't throw the ball when he can't find an opening for the pass. So he takes a lot of sacks. Deshaun Watson, he's a Super Bowl quarterback, so he takes a lot of sacks. This just says he's running around trying to make play happen. Marcus Mariota sucks. He just can't make decisions, so he takes a lot of sacks. You can see, actually, in the range of outcomes, there's usually an answer for something in the range of outcomes. If you go to the defensive ranks, you can see who gets sacked the most. Denver is allowing a sack on almost 12% of attempts. Houston, almost 14%. Baltimore, almost 13%. Seattle, almost 9%. And then the opponent team total, the Ravens were a good defense this week because they allow quite a few sacks per attempt and they had a low team total. So things like that matter. When it comes to picking defense for DFS, like, the only thing that you want to do is look for upside from your defense. Did you see the Will Fuller end of the game TD reversal? It looked like catch to me. I actually didn't. I don't watch sports. So I heard plenty about it, though. And it wouldn't have helped me in SPY. It would have helped me for my Houston stacks, and I probably would have made a little bit more money this week. But it ended up being, it was a bit of a bummer. Can you do that currently in the sheets, or do you need to go to the archive? You need to go to the archive because it builds off of the stats that are in the range of outcomes. Like, if you tried to do it in the current range of outcomes, it would only work for the games that are playing tonight. So go into the archives and pick that stuff up. You thought that Roger Troutman's son, the guy from California, loved with Tupac? Troutman. Would I play Washington defense versus Lamar? I don't know, probably not. Like, I think that they were a viable option, though, like, because Lamar gives up so many sacks, and when he throws, he usually throws deep, and that's open for interceptions. Like, I think too many people care about trying to project a defense when it's like basically all luck. If you get a defensive touchdown, if you get a kick return or a punt return, or if you get 3 interceptions, or if you get 5 sacks, like, it's not really that easy to project, and it's mostly variance. So if you're choosing a defense, usually you just choose the one that fits. If you're ending up with a lot of salary left over in your builds, then you probably choose a more expensive one. If you're ending up with not very much salary left in your builds, then choose like the cheapest defense and just try to fill it around it. Think all the Texans got an upgrade from that human potato O'Brien finally on? Yeah, I fucking do. I was getting ready to say that the Texans really just like they're not usable for the rest of the year if Bill O'Brien's going to continue to be playing play calling, because the dude goes into a press conference and is like, "Oh yeah, well we only ran the ball 26 times, so we need to run the ball more if we want to win games." It's like, dude, you're fucking high. You are psychotic. Do you not have the internet? Like, do you not understand or like know how to read any graph ever that anybody has shown you? Every single thing within analytics, or even just like think about it. Like you don't even have to use analytics to know that passing is better than running. You don't even have to use hard math. All you have to do is say, okay, the average rushing play ends with like 3.72 yards or something like that, and the average passing play ends with like 6.4 yards. So why the fuck would you be taking half of the average from your plays and like volunteer to do that more often? Like, why are you saying, oh, we only ran the ball 26 times? That's the reason why we lost. When running plays, you don't even have to know hard analytics or statistics to know that running plays get you less yardage. Why the fuck would you do that? I have a soft spot here. I get a little bit mad about this subject because I hate. It's one of the reasons why I don't watch sports is because like analysts and broadcasters and commentators, um, they're just dumb. Like so many of them are so stupid, and they just don't really understand the finer points of the game. They don't understand the mathematical side of things. So I get infuriated when they do that. We want 20 plus rushing attempts and at least 10 targets for a wide receiver. Um, you want you want at least 25 opportunities for running backs. So whether that is 15 rushes and 10 targets or 20 rushes and 5 targets, like you want at least 25 opportunities for running backs, and you have red zone work. If you don't have red zone work as a running back, like I don't really want to use you. For wide receivers, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think that wide receivers are literally only you only care about wide receivers as far as you care about teams that you want to stack. One-off wide receivers are like you should be correlating. You should be doing something with your wide receivers that accomplish something other than just playing the wide receiver. Running the ball down 8 with under a minute left. Yeah, he's a fucking moron, dude. And yeah, he got fired, Bodex. Like he got fired today. He also has two of the best pass catching running backs in the league. Decides not to pass to them. Idiot. One other thing, do you think you can rank your top 5 plays from the sheet moving forward so I don't have to overlook a Mike Davis? Dude, I talked about Mike Davis like all week. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I said so. Like towards the end of the week, actually, I can go back and find it in Discord because I always post like my final thoughts before the slate. This is gonna be a while back, isn't it? Yeah, hold on. One sec. Okay. Yeah. So I said, oh no, that was God damn it. I'll get there. Okay, so I said currently at 10:26 a.m. Houston is my favorite stack, and it's not really close. Mike Davis for all the cash here, so I mentioned him there. I'm leaning towards eating Kamara chalk mostly because I don't have a lot of wide receivers to pay up for, and it's not hard to fit Kamara, and then I ended up fading him. The Rams seem like the worst chalk. Cincinnati Jacksonville game seems really great for GPPs. Looks like a letdown spot for Dallas against the Browns, and the Raiders stack's really cheap if you want to jam an elite running backs to high priced one off. And then later on, okay, finished building. Mike Davis in all 3 lineups and Alvin Kamara in none. Houston, Baltimore, Cincinnati. Feels terrible to pay down to TE, so I'm paying up in 2 of the 3. Have a lot invested in Will Fuller and Adam Thielen and 100% Lions defense. Also, that I liked Chris Carson quite a bit and didn't find myself on him in any of my lineups, but liked him. So I always go back through and like talk through the things that I really like. And even how often did I mention Mike Davis in the Discord this week? Let's see. I have a core of Zeke, Mike Davis, Will Fuller, Tyler Lockett, Adam Thielen. Mike Davis in all 3 lineups. Mike Davis for all the cash here. I said that Mike Davis was the best play by a lot. Somebody asked me Rojo and Mike Davis, and I said Mike Davis. Uh, Somebody was talking about DJ Moore, and I said that I preferred Mike Davis. Somebody said I was Mike Davis believer, and I said yes. Mike Davis getting the same opportunity as Alvin Kamara for 5,700. Mike Davis is really going to be 15% owned with MME, and I'm going to MME the million maker and just lock him. Like I talked about Mike Davis like since like Tuesday of last week. Like I talked about him all week. I thought that he was the best running back playing on the slate by like a mile. Mike McCarthy is another fat idiot not challenging the Elliott TD, and then Pollard comes in for the vulture. Yeah, Mike McCarthy's a jackass. Him and Jason Garrett are both terrible. Bonifone did vulture him. So did Teddy fucking Bridgewater when he ran it in. So yeah. Anyway, I talked a lot about Mike Davis, but this lineup for the top of the spy, like as we get back to the actual like lineup reviews here, this one makes a lot of sense. The top lineup for the Millie Maker was pretty much the same thing. It was still that Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, Odell Beckham Jr., and CeeDee Lamb. But he faded Alvin Kamara and Ezekiel Elliott. Ended up with Joe Mixon, Ronald Jones, and Mike Davis. Ended up paying below 6K for all three of his running backs. That's something that, for the most part, you want to do anyway. If you can get a lot of opportunity from your running backs for a cheaper cost, like that's always the route that you want to take. He also played Darren Waller with the Buccaneers defense. Playing Darren Waller made sense. Like again, this lineup is not that hard to build if you're looking at the range of outcomes, right? Like the Dallas stack was a top-rated stack. Ronald Jones was projected for like 17 fantasy points. Darren Waller was, I'm pretty sure, the top projected tight end overall. Loved Mike Davis. The only thing that I whiffed on this week was Joe Mixon. Like I just wasn't into him. I need to look back and like do a little bit more review and look back through the stats and try to find if there was something that I missed on Joe Mixon. But yeah, I just that's the only thing that I missed on. I thought you were in on Gallup over Cooper and Lamb as Cowboys wide receiver one. I am. I think that Michael Gallup is like better than Amari Cooper in terms of like actual wide receiver talent, but it just didn't pay off this week. It is what it is. Was bad. You were expecting more from Daniel Jones? I was not. Daniel Jones sucks. Anyway, so these are the lineups at one. I think that it made sense. Like there wasn't anything that super surprised me. So let's get into the lineups that I built. So I have 3 GPP lineups, and then I also have a cash lineup. I entered 3 this week just because I was feeling a little bit frisky. I thought that was a good week for GPPs. My first stack was a Baltimore stack. I went with Lamar Jackson, Mike Davis, Ronald Jones, Adam Thielen, Will Fuller, Terry McLaurin, Mark Andrews, Traquan Smith, and the Lions defense. This lineup was crushing for a long time. Like I was at like 182 when top scores on the slate were only like 205 or something like that. I was really, really crushing with this lineup. I knew that I wanted a Baltimore stack in everything. Like I thought that Lamar Jackson was going to be way under owned relative to his upside just off of a bad week. Thought that him with Mark Andrews made a lot of sense because I really didn't like tight end this week and I just wanted to pay up. I haven't liked tight end for a couple weeks straight now. Brought it back with Terry McLaurin. Thought that was just like a natural thing to do. That there were some like really, really close calls for this lineup too. Lamar Jackson got vultured on the goal line by Mark Ingram. Terry McLaurin went down at the 1 yard line and then got the touchdown went to Dwayne Haskins on the QB sneak. Mark Andrews was like just short of catching another touchdown. Like there were some big plays that could have swung this up to like 210 or something like that. I was in second place. Yeah, I was right there, dude. I was right there for most of the day. I was probably top 10 until I don't know, like 2 p.m. almost, and then that Cowboys explosion killed me. Traquan was a nice call. There were so many unavailable targets. You wish you used fucking Renfro and Ward. Yeah, I mean, it was really just like, if I thought that this lineup was going to do really well, Alvin Kamara could not do well, so somebody needed to score touchdowns for the Saints, and I figured that nobody would be on Traquan Smith because people don't like him for whatever reason, but that worked out pretty well. He had 2 touchdowns and not very many receiving yards, but the 2 touchdowns is really nice. I went with Mike Davis, Ronald Jones in this one. I paid down at running back and just talked about that as something that you should usually try to be doing. Thought that Mike Davis was fantastic. Ronald Jones, I wish that he would have had a little bit more involvement. I wish he would have scored a touchdown, but he ended up doing really well. I can't complain about 21.8 fantasy points from 5,700. I thought that Will Fuller and Adam Thielen, I talked about that as being part of my core. Like, I wanted the correlation of that game. It was really high on Houston and Minnesota, so I really wanted to get those guys into this lineup, especially since, like, I knew that Will Fuller was going to be high owned. I knew that Mike Davis and Ronald Jones was going to be high owned, but it didn't really matter because I had so much leverage on my Baltimore stack that I didn't really need to be all that different. And then the Lions defense, yeah, so one, the price, because I usually want to pay down at defense. And two, it just kind of goes back to, again, me wanting to say, all right, well, if Alvin Kamara doesn't do well, then the Lions defense, I think, was able to lock him up. I didn't really think that Drew Brees had anything left in him. I think he's pretty dust. He's pretty not good at this point. He can't really throw that deep. So I had the Lions defense in 2 out of 3. I really expected, like, when I have him with Traquan Smith in this lineup, I just expected Traquan Smith to probably have like a deep touchdown and maybe another touchdown like within the 10-yard line or something like that. That's what I was hoping for. And I wanted the Lions defense to be able to lock down Alvin Kamara. It was more of leverage off of Alvin Kamara than anything. If you weren't winning it, then I wanted me to get it. Yeah, I wanted me to get it too, man. What you or I will take it down this year for sure. You like stacking QB with wide receiver or tight end. I had Watson, Fuller. So that reversal really killed me. Yeah, I usually want to try. I mean, this year I've been really trying to pair my quarterback with tight ends just because tight end has felt really, really weak every week it feels really weak. And like we'll get into the other 2 lineups where tight end like fucked me hard. Tight end has just been a really, really inconsistent position outside of the stacks that you put together. So I have really enjoyed using tight ends in my stacks, and it just fits naturally well with Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. Like Mark Andrews gets so much equity of like the important plays, first down plays, moving the sticks, in the red zone, stuff like that. He's really, really valuable to them. All right, so this lineup made me the most money this week. Moving on. I also had a Houston stack where I went with Houston, Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, brought it back with Adam Thielen, ended up using the running backs of Ezekiel Elliott and Mike Davis. This was my preferred running back pairing this week. Also had Tyler Lockett, Logan Thomas, and the Lions defense. There were a lot of snowflakes in this lineup. Deshaun Watson, Adam Thielen, and Will Fuller ended up doing really well. Everybody knows about the Brandon Cook story and how he scored 0 fantasy points as chalk. So that sucked for a significant portion of the field. Logan Thomas ended up getting targets and doing nothing with them for the 4th week in a row. And then Tyler Lockett, just like huge letdown. I did not see this Tyler Lockett game coming. Seattle letdown was pretty brutal. They still scored 30 real life points, but none of it went to Tyler Lockett, and that was a huge letdown. Like I said, like this lineup does better if we get that last touchdown with Will Fuller and Deshaun Watson. But overall, it's not winning anything. Like having the dud of Brandon Cooks and the dud of Tyler Lockett when OBJ ends up absolutely just dominating, like you can't have a mess up at wide receiver when there's so many wide receivers that did well. So Tyler Lockett doomed me regardless of whether the Houston stack did well. But this lineup, I mean, I had some uncorrelated stuff here. Like I had Tyler Lockett, who was not correlated well with Logan Thomas. Obviously, they were not correlated at all, and I was really trying to figure out a way to correlate between them. I did consider going with Marquise Brown over Tyler Lockett, and realistically, I probably should have, looking back on it, because I wanted to try to use my core of those 3 teams of Houston, Baltimore, and Seattle. And I just wanted to try to use those cores together. So using Tyler Lockett, he was one of my top projected wide receivers. He was the top receiver in terms of expected touchdowns in the individual levels. So Really wanted Tyler Lockett. Didn't work out. Is what it is. But I did really like the way this lineup got put together. Brandon Cooks, that sucks, but it is what it is. See, Tannehill and Smith was a nice one early on if going cheaper. Two things I wanted to say: Murray Vulture, Kamara TDs, Malcolm Brown outproduced Henderson. Yeah, I mean Murray Vulture and Kamara TDs though that makes sense. Like they like using him in the red zone. And Malcolm Brown outproducing Henderson. I said on the stream, I'm pretty sure during the Recipe for Success of Week 4, that I didn't really like Darrell Henderson that much because I don't know who they're going to use for the Rams. Like they like using multiple running backs. And why Lions D again? Like I just want to leverage off Alvin Kamara. Like my whole thing is that I want to be able to leverage the chalk one way or another in each lineup. So the Lions D I had in 2 out of 3 lineups. We'll talk. I had the Panthers defense in the third just because like I didn't want to have 100% of a defense. But the Lions defense, like I said, I expected the Saints to be a pretty easy game plan for Detroit, and they just sucked. It is what it is. Also, they allowed me to fit whatever I wanted, really, and I would always rather just punt defense since I think it's mostly volatility. Moving on to third lineup, this is a Cincinnati and Jacksonville stack. Ended up with Joe Burrow, Tyler Boyd, and AJ Green. Brought it back with DJ Chark. Went with my preferred running back pairing of Mike Davis and Ezekiel Elliott. I did actually use Adam Trotman here. He got 0 fantasy points. I had Tyler Lockett again, and then I also had the Panthers defense. We already talked plenty about Ezekiel Elliott and Mike Davis. Talked about Tyler Lockett. The Joe Burrow, Tyler Boyd, and AJ Green 3-way stack. Tyler Boyd had a touchdown that was called back due to a penalty. And AJ Green, man, it's getting hard to roster him. It's hard to watch him go out there and not make the most out of the opportunities that he has. So that's a bit of a bummer, but like I said, Cincinnati, they throw 75% of the time and they throw 76% in the red zone. So if they were going to score a lot of points, it was more likely going to be based on passing game. It was more likely that Joe Burrow was going to throw for 3 touchdowns than Joe Mixon was going to rush for 3 touchdowns. So really liked that Cincinnati side. And then Jacksonville, they were another team that passes a lot in the red zone. DJ Chark ended up projecting really, really well. And if you go to the backlogs and you go to the wide receivers, you see the DJ Chark, it's kind of like a glaring discrepancy. Like you have all these guys who are projected to be high owned, and then you run into DJ Chark, who is projected to be just 4% owned. I thought that he looked like a spot that I kind of really wanted to come back on. And with Cincinnati looking like they were going to pass for plenty of touchdowns, like when you go to the goal line splits, sort by passing touchdowns, Cincinnati is right here. 74% passing, 76%. The Game Pass TDs for Game Stack was projected for the highest on the slate by a long shot at 3.9, since Cincinnati was implied for 2 and Jacksonville was basically implied for 2. So, like, I thought this was really, really good. I stick by that because the math says that was the more likely thing to happen, but Joe Mixon ended up getting the touchdowns, and DJ Chark ended up getting the touchdown for Jacksonville. Told you Higgins was better in green. I don't think Higgins is better in green. I need to like dive into the week 4 usage for AJ Green because I might be giving up on him after that one. A couple weeks in a row now that I've used him, and he's just been letting me down. That's why you were on Burrow and Boyd. Mixon was definitely the play. I don't know that Mixon was the play. He ended up being like the better result, but I think that like the math still says that Cincinnati and Jacksonville was a good stack. So I don't mind using them by any means. Like I don't have any regrets on that stack or on this lineup in general. I think that it ended up not working out very well, but I liked having them all at really, really low ownership. DJ Chark did his job. It's just Cincinnati didn't the Cincinnati stack didn't do their job, and that just it is what it is. And the Panthers defense, I hadn't talked about them yet, but like I talked about at the beginning of this when we were talking about defenses, Kyler Murray runs a lot, and I like using defenses against mobile quarterbacks since they give up more sacks than regular teams. So I didn't mind the Panthers defense, especially at low ownership. Like if I'm going to take a defense, I'd rather it be a not chalky defense. Really quick, we'll talk about my cash game lineup, and then I need to go turn on a light because it's starting to get dark outside, and I need to turn on a light. But my cash lineup was Ryan Fitzpatrick, Alvin Kamara, Mike Davis, Tyler Lockett, Devontae Parker, DJ Moore, Logan Thomas, Darrell Henderson, and the Bengals defense. I thought that Ryan Fitzpatrick as a cheap quarterback was going to be really highly owned against Seattle. Him and Devontae Parker made for a really like natural pairing that was really easy to do in cash. Thought they were both going to be high owned. Brought it back with Tyler Lockett, who I had as the highest projected, not only the highest projected wide receiver on Seattle, but also the highest owned wide receiver on the slate, I'm pretty sure. And for those of you who are in the Discord, like I always just kind of want to put together the chalkiest lineup that I possibly can. So I figured I would just plug in Alvin Kamara, Mike Davis, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Devontae Parker, and Tyler Lockett. DJ Moore projected for high ownership as well, so I decided to throw him in there. That was really easy. And then Darrell Henderson, I heard a lot of talk about Darrell Henderson, so I figured he was going to be pretty high owned. He ended up not being super high owned, but like relatively high owned. So I just wanted to stack up as much chalk as I possibly could. And it made for a pretty easy build. Like I made this the night before and I didn't actually have to make any changes. It's nice when a defense does not score 20 to 30 fantasy points. Totally agree. Fuck that. The Bengals D to counter James Robinson chalk? No, just I thought they projected pretty well in terms of like the ranks that I had. So if you go into the range of outcomes and you go to defensive ranks, like the Bengals kind of like popped out. I mean, obviously the Jets played on Thursday Night Football, but if you're looking from price down, like they looked like they were pretty good value up against Jacksonville team that gives up a lot of sacks. They were a bit underpriced, so I just ended up going there. Like I could have gone with the Jaguars side as well, but I think I had like 3,100 left or something like that, so it was kind of between those two. And I just figured that why not? Bengals defense fine. I see people's optimals. It's usually the chalk, but that's cash games. When you play the spy, do you want to stack up as much chalk as chalk also? No, I don't. I'll answer that question after I turn on this light, just because I need to turn on light because it's getting dark. All right. No. So I want to play as much chalk as possible in cash because I want other people to have to make mistakes. Like my entire strategy in cash is just like, all right, I'm going to play the most popular plays possible. I'm going to play all the plays that are the consensus best. I'm going to let other people make decisions that sink them. That's the entire point for me in cash. And it works really well. It worked really well in NBA. It worked really well in MLB. And it's been working in NFL as well. I think that I lost like, I don't know, 15% or something. And I had a really bad week in terms of like the chalk doing bad. So I'll take that any day for the most part. But I just want to play chalk and cash. In GPPs, in the SPY still has like, I don't know, what, 3,000 entries or something like that. It's not a small tournament. So you still need to be able to differentiate yourself. I think that 5,055, yeah. So I mean, that's not a small tournament. Like you still need to be different. You still need to be playing ways to leverage the rest of the field. It's much easier when you know that you're going to have like Alvin Kamara at 50% owned. You only have to really leverage one piece of chalk in any tournament if that chalk is going to be 50% owned. You don't have to really be that much different or do anything different. If there's going to be multiple pieces of chalk, like if there's going to be like 4 pieces of chalk that are going to be 20+% owned, then you got to get a little bit weird. But I don't really think too much about chalk. If I build a lineup that I think is super, super popular, like if I ended up building, I don't know, a Seattle stack with Mike Davis and Alvin Kamara and Adam Trotman or something like that, then yeah, I want to get a little bit different there. I want to like pay down at one of my running back spots or pay up at a wide receiver or something like that to get a little bit different. But for the most part in the SPY, like I'm not trying to stack up chalk. I'm trying to leverage enough of the ownership to let me climb if things go badly. And it worked really well this week. I was basically it was just that Cowboys explosion in the fourth quarter. Otherwise, I would have had a massive week. So, like, the process on that is basically avoid Dallas and Seattle and like the other stacks. I avoided most of the stacks and I avoided Alvin Kamara. And then I just built the best possible lineup that I could with a Baltimore stack, which was only 5% owned. So, I knew that I leveraged enough of the field in terms of the popular stacks and in terms of Alvin Kamara. Like I had the Lions defense and I had Tre'Quan Smith, so I was leveraging Alvin Kamara well there. I had Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, so I was leveraging the Dallas and the Seattle chalk as well. And then I ended up having that Houston Minnesota correlation, and like at that point, I had leveraged so much that it didn't really matter if I had Will Fuller. It didn't really matter if Adam Thielen was popular. It didn't matter that Mike Davis was popular. Like I had leveraged so much of the field that I was going to pass about 75% of the field. If my thoughts were right and their thoughts were wrong, I was automatically going to, at the very least, cash. So cash games, not great. Let's break down some subscriber lineups, and then we'll get out of here. So this is Mike Kadija. He is a subscriber. He actually came over to Paydirt for NFL or for NHL. Ended up having a really good NHL week, and now he's having some really good NFL weeks. So he ended up going with Dallas, with a Dallas stack with Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. Brought it back with OBJ. His running backs were Mike Davis and Ronald Jones, so he paid down at running back. Smart move, good idea. Used TJ Hawkinson, who ended up being a pretty popular part of the New Orleans-Detroit game. Had Will Fuller, who was obviously a very well-projected good piece of Houston. And then had the Bengals defense, who, like I talked about, was kind of like a glaring misprice for me in terms of the defensive rankings. This is a really good stack. Like paying down at running back with Mike Davis and Ronald Jones, that's like fantastic. That's what you want to be doing. It got away from the Alvin Kamara chalk, made him different so that he didn't have to worry at all about any of the rest of the chalk here. Like he didn't have to worry about how chalky the Dallas and OBJ combination would be. He didn't have to worry about how chalky TJ Hawkinson would be. He didn't have to worry about the chalk on Will Fuller. Like he was already passing at least 50% of the field just by avoiding Alvin Kamara. And then Michael Gallup ended up only 2% owned and the Bengals only 4% owned. So that, putting all of that together, like fantastic way to put that together. What was the pricing diff on Gallup and Lamb again? 1K? Let's go find out. I don't remember off the top of my head. So CeeDee Lamb was 5,400, Michael Gallup was 6,200, so $800 just about. But like they projected, Michael Thomas projected a little bit better. So, Michael Gallup projected a little bit better. And the Bengals defense looked pretty good too. I think that, and I see what you're going for here too. Like if you would have dropped down from Michael Gallup to CeeDee Lamb and then paid up more at defense, like could have had a massive week. But I think that I also would have gone with Prescott, with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and OBJ. Like I probably wouldn't have played CeeDee Lamb this week. Because I wouldn't have needed to. The only way that I would have gotten CeeDee Lamb is if I would have paid up from either Mike Davis or Ronald Jones to get to like Ezekiel Elliott. But then I wouldn't have been able to afford TJ Hawkinson. I wouldn't have been able to afford the Bengals defense. Like I think this is probably about as close to a Dallas stack as I would have built. With Mike Davis and Ronald Jones, I probably would have paid down at tight end, maybe. I don't know. This is about as good of a Dallas stack as I would have built. So you leveraged everything correctly. Like put together the Dallas stack, brought it back with OBJ. If you think that Dak Prescott is going to throw 4 touchdowns, then OBJ probably has to be coming from behind. Or in this case, OBJ is the reason why the Browns were so far ahead, and Dallas ended up having to come from behind. So that correlation makes sense. Mike Davis and Ronald Jones, both cheap running backs with a lot of opportunity, played that correctly. Will Fuller as a one-off, fantastic. We thought that he was going to be a good play. We really liked Houston. Hawkinson as a expensive tight end in the Bengals defense, which rated well. No notes. I think this is a really, really good lineup. Just good job, dude. Great job this week. Moving on to N.I. Freeman, pretty consistent member in the Discord. How you doing, man? Hope you watch this and hear the review. Deshaun Watson with a Houston stack with Will Fuller. Brought it back with Adam Thielen. So he went with a single quarterback with a wide receiver and brought it back with another wide receiver. I talk about that quite a bit in the Discord, where I think that if you have a mobile quarterback, then you are able to do just quarterback with one wide receiver and then bring it back for the game stack correlation. You don't really need 2 wide receivers with Deshaun Watson. And I even said it in the Discord. I said that I didn't think that I was going to use Brendan Cooks unless I had to. So I ended up having to use him in my stack. But you really didn't need to. You could have just gone to Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller with Adam Thielen. And I said that and gave that advice. So he followed that perfectly well. Ended up with Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, and then Darrell Henderson. Fuck yourself, man. Why'd you play Darrell Henderson? Like I talked about Mike Davis 1,000 times. Don't play Darrell Henderson. He also had Hunter Renfrow and Rob Gronkowski. Hunter Renfrow projected pretty well. I think he projected for like 15 fantasy points. He was a pretty trendy, cheap play up against a Buffalo team that should have been ahead. The Raiders should have been passing from behind, so the game flow made a lot of sense to play Hunter Renfrow, and he was cheap. He allowed a lot of things. And Robert Gronkowski, another one that I talked about all week that I didn't really understand the love behind him. Like people were kind of hyping him up and the usage that he got the week before, and they're like, well, Rob Gronkowski didn't come out of retirement to block, and it's like, maybe he did. People forget that Rob Gronkowski was the best blocking tight end in the league by far for like most of his career. People think that George Kittle is really good blocking tight end, but Rob Gronkowski was incredible. He was fantastic. So it, I don't think that they have to use him in the passing game. Bruce Arians doesn't really like using tight ends in the passing game. Um, Tom Brady threw 5 touchdowns last week, and Rob Gronkowski wasn't involved. So I talked a lot about not really liking him, but I understand using him because he was cheap. It made it so that it was easy to play who else you wanted to play. Um, but yeah, you should have gone with Mike Davis, man. You're killing me. I think overall, like this is a pretty good lineup, but I think that you had not enough correlation. So Deshaun Watson, Will Fuller, and Adam Thielen, you have your correlation there, but then you didn't really have correlation anywhere else, right? Like Joe Mixon is on an island by himself. Alvin Kamara is on an island by himself. I guess you have Mixon in the Bengals defense for the running back defense correlation, but that correlation doesn't really exist. Um, and then you had Will Fuller, or I mean, you had Hunter Renfrow, who was by himself. You had Robert Gronkowski, who was by himself, and Darrell Henderson, who was by himself. Using three running backs, like you don't need to have the correlations there. But with Rob Gronkowski and Hunter Renfrow, like you don't really gain anything from using those two players outside of salary concerns. And I think that what might have happened here is you just kind of built a lineup where you ran out of money. I think that you probably built Houston with Will Fuller and Adam Thielen, and then you plugged in Alvin Kamara, and then you plugged in Joe Mixon and Darrell Henderson. And I think you started with that, and then you're like, well, shit, I don't have very much money left. You put in Hunter Renfrow because he was somebody who rated well on the sheets and had a decent projection. And then you just use Rob Gronkowski because he was there. And I'm always going to say don't do that. Don't use players just because you can't afford other players. Overall, a lot of good pieces in this lineup, but I don't think that you correlated enough. Think about that secondary stack, like where you have maybe two wide receiver spots left, or you have a wide receiver tight end spot left. Like try to correlate those two pieces, like I did with my Baltimore stack. Like I had that Baltimore stack of Lamar Jackson with Mark Andrews, brought it back with Terry McLaurin for the correlation there, and then I also had correlation from Will Fuller and Adam Thielen. So the more correlation you can have in your lineups and the less one-offs you can have, the better your odds are of those things working out. Do I have the line you said? Yeah, we can review that one. Sure. This one was Broncos 21. He ended up doing really well, scored 180. Went with a Dallas stack, brought it back with OBJ. He was really unique though. He went with Dak Prescott with CeeDee Lamb, and then brought it back with OBJ. Avoided both Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Ended up going with Hunter Renfrow, Adam Trotman as value plays, I assume. Adam Trotman, I mean, he made sense. He was 30% owned, but he made sense. For running backs, he went with Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, and Jonathan Taylor, and then he used the Texans defense against Minnesota. And the Texans defense did rate well in defensive ranks, so that one makes sense. Like, I don't think that's crazy. Minnesota's been struggling a lot, so it made sense to use that one as well. Going with Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook, both of those were direct pivots off of Alvin Kamara, so that's a good decision to make. Ended up saying, okay, well, I think that these running backs are going to score better than Alvin Kamara will, and that's going to surpass a lot of the chalk, and you're going to be different because you're paying up with two different running backs rather than just paying up with one, where most people are going to be going Alvin Kamara and Mike Davis. Also used Jonathan Taylor. I talked a bit about Jonathan Taylor. I wasn't quite sold on him. The projections liked him because of the baselines, but I was worried about the usage after last week, where he just like he wasn't utilized correctly. He wasn't utilized as much as he was in week two. He only got like 13 out of 35 running back touches or something, and that trend continued, and that sucks because he was priced well and it was a pretty good spot against Chicago. So that sucks, but I understand the play. And he looked like great leverage off some of the other plays. Like he was only projected for 4% ownership or something like that, projected well. So I think that play made sense. It does look like they're going to be running back by committee, but I think that play made sense in GPPs. They use Wilkins way too much the last few weeks. Has been benching starters and blowouts. Yeah, I mean it's just they like Wilkins. They don't really like using running backs all that much. Like they prefer to be a committee. Even when it was Marlon Mack, they prefer to be a committee. So there was hope that Jonathan Taylor was going to have the baselines that he projected with, but it just ended up not being there. This line was good though. Dak Prescott with CeeDee Lamb. The only concern that I have with this is that with Dak Prescott, I know that he has had some rushing touchdown upside, but especially if you are playing him with Ezekiel Elliott and CeeDee Lamb, like if you play Dak Prescott with CeeDee Lamb, you're saying that Dak Prescott is going to have like two passing touchdowns, two rushing touchdowns. So that would make it so that Zeke isn't that great of a play. But if you play Zeke, then you think that there's going to be multiple rushing touchdowns from Ezekiel Elliott and maybe a passing touchdown from Dak Prescott. It's hard to use all three of these players together, I think, just because of the way that Dallas wants to work in the red zone. And we saw it here, like Dak Prescott, he ended up having a great game. CeeDee Lamb, great game. Mark Cooper, great game. Ezekiel Elliott, I don't think is going to correlate well with the Cowboys this year. I think that it's going to be either Ezekiel Elliott or Dak Prescott in winning lineups. In years past, you've been able to use Dak Prescott with Ezekiel Elliott because Zeke has such good work in the receiving game, but they have so many deeper weapons this year that I think Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott is going to be negative correlation moving forward. So usually, yeah, you can use a quarterback with a running back that is very highly utilized in the passing game, but I don't think that's going to be the case with Dallas this year. I understand the thinking behind it though. Adam Trotman, Hunter Renfro, like yeah, they're value plays. I get why you played them. But kind of like the same thought that I had with the last lineup is if you like you have two one-offs here with Hunter Renfro and Adam Trotman where you just use them for value instead of trying to correlate two more players against each other. You could have dropped down from Jonathan Taylor to Rojo and came up from Hunter Renfro to like Kenny Galladay or Marvin Jones or something like that across from Adam Trotman. Just try to maximize correlations. Other than that, like I understand what you put together here. It ended up doing really well. 180 is pretty good. I worry about Ezekiel Elliott with Dak Prescott. I understand the thinking, but for the most part, you focused on the correlations well for the first five players, and then it kind of fell apart with Hunter Renfro and Adam Trotman. And then because Franchise wanted to see... Franchise, are you still in here for your lineup to be reviewed? Because I'll review it right now if you're still in here. Otherwise, I'll jump off. Oh, shit, yeah, he's still in here. You're the man, dude. I love you in Discord, by the way. You're awesome. One sec, I gotta go find it. Yeah, I saw that it was two different photos. Yeah, here we go. All right. So your lineup was... a Buffalo sack with Josh Allen, Chris Carson, Kenyon Drake, Amari Cooper, Tyler Boyd, Brendan Cooks, Adam Trotman, Dalvin Cook, and the Bengals defense. So first question, don't use Josh Allen alone. What are you doing there? You gotta have him with at least one wide receiver. Like it's fine to use a rushing quarterback. It's fine to use Josh Allen with one wide receiver or one tight end, but you got to use him with something. You got to have correlation somewhere. It's very, very rare that Josh Allen is going to run in 4 touchdowns. He's going to pass for something. He's going to pass for at least 150 yards. Like there's going to be some wide receiver that gets there. Well, if you know, then why didn't you do it? What are you doing to yourself? You didn't do that. You didn't play Mike Davis. Killing me here. Do I ever pair a QB with a pass catching running back? Yeah, you can if he's super involved. Like you can do it with like Christian McCaffrey, or you can do it with like Saquon Barkley or something like that. I think, but I don't think that it works with Dallas this year. Newton and James White. James White doesn't get enough work to like really be utilized in stacks these days. And like the Patriots, they're just going to run the ball in the red zone. That's either going to be Rex Burkhead or Sonny Michel, and then like Cam Newton is going to rush it in. So like you need them to be. It has to be an elite running back. Like you have to have an elite running back if you're going to use them in stack. Like Ezekiel Elliott has been good in the past. Christian McCaffrey is one. Alvin Kamara is another one. Yeah, Kamara PPR gold back for sure. Break down the rest of this. You had Chris Carson, which I liked. I was super into that. Kenyon Drake ended up not doing jack shit, but I understand playing him. He was 19% owned. It's not like he was a terrible play. You had Amari Cooper, Tyler Boyd, Brandon Cooks. Like I understand Amari Cooper, I understand Tyler Boyd, I understand Brandon Cooks, but like there was no real correlation between any of those plays, right? Like Amari Cooper, you're just when you build a lineup like this with no correlation, pretty much all you're doing is putting together like a giant player prop parlay for touchdowns. When you have like Josh Allen, Chris Carson, Kenyon Drake, Amari Cooper, Tyler Boyd, Brandon Cooks, Adam Trotman, Dalvin Cook, and the Bengals defense, basically what you're saying is that you think Josh Allen is going to have multiple touchdowns, so there's a prop for that. Chris Carson is going to have a touchdown. Kenyon Drake's going to have a touchdown. You see where I'm going with that. The odds that you can get on something like that are probably the same as you would get if you were playing a lineup in DFS, so you might as well just go do that. You got to have more correlations than this. If you have Josh Allen, like pair him with Stephon Diggs instead of Tyler Boyd or Amari Cooper. If you have Josh Allen, then bring it back with either Hunter Renfrow or Darren Waller. Like there are a lot of ways that you could have improved correlations here. Sure, the one-off plays of Chris Carson, Amari Cooper, and Dalvin Cook ended up doing pretty well. Like it had a decent like projection, but when you're building these things out, you really got to be worrying about the correlations because predicting the future is really, really hard. We're not really in the business of predicting the future. What we're really in the business of is assuming a certain kind of game theory and putting together a lineup that ends up within a certain goal. So like with this lineup, what was your goal? You know, your goal kind of looks like it was Chris Carson to leverage Seattle, Josh Allen because he projected well, Amari Cooper because he projected well, Tyler Boyd because he projected well, Brandon Cooks because he was cheap, Adam Trotman because he was cheap, and Dalvin Cook as leverage off of Alvin Kamara, I think. So like this lineup doesn't have a goal. Like there you just put together a lineup that projected well across the board, had some decent values. This is something that an optimizer would spit out if you didn't tell it to do anything. Like if you just ran an optimizer and said, hey, here you go, and you didn't ask for any correlation, you didn't ask for any groups, you didn't put in any rules, like this is something that an optimizer would spit out. And that's not how you need to think about lineups when you're building them by hand. When you're building an MME, that's a different thing. But even an MME, like you have to maximize your correlations because correlation is the reason why things have a good chance of happening. If you just tie together 10 players in a player prop parlay, your odds are astronomical of that happening. That like they're basically zero. Correlations are the only reason why roster construction makes sense, and a lot of the time the only reason why people win GPPs. So you really got to make sure that you're maximizing correlations. I see Bridgewater this week coming because I didn't. There are some sharps that were on Bridgewater. I think that Carolina, Arizona made sense as a game stack just because Arizona runs so many plays and Carolina has a really skinny target tree. So I can see that. Or Singletary, who benefited from Mossad and can catch passes. Singletary with Josh Allen is negative correlation, though, because Singletary gets vultured by Josh Allen. And if you're going to unlock upside, like it's not just about meeting your median. Like you need upside from all your players. You need a path to upside for all your players. So I wouldn't play Singletary with Josh Allen. you ran out of time with your two lineups. Uh, Pro tip: do your hand builds first before you do your MME runs, because your MME should mirror what your hand builds are. Like you should hand build first and decide kind of like what you want your max entry to look like across like the entire thing, and then you should, like, after you've built your hand build lineups, after you've built like your main GPP lineup like this, then you should go into your MME and you should try to build as many lineups that follow those same kind of circumstances. So that's just like pro tip. I think Cook's good play without O'Brien. His price should drop, right? Yeah, probably. I haven't looked at all on next week. I'm still doing a review. I'll do a review until about Thursday morning. But with that being said, this has been a lineup review. This week was, I think that we nailed a lot of the things. I think that a lot of things went the way that you probably would have expected them to go. I don't feel that we were super off anywhere. The only big miss that I think I had was Joe Mixon. Outside of that, I think everything pretty much made sense. Um, yeah, and dude, you just keep improving. Like you and Neil, he's another guy in the Discord who asks a lot of questions, really wants to get better. That's why I'm here and that's why the community's here. So just keep working at it and you'll keep building better lineups, man. You can always DM me too and ask me what I think about lineups. So this has been a pretty good lineup review. If you're not a sub over at the site over at paydirt.ghost.io, please come subscribe. It's $25 a month and we're having a great time in the NFL season. And we cover all sports. So if you are a subscriber, then for sure, like jump in the Discord so we can talk about things. But if you're not, thank you for tuning in. I'm going to jump off and go get some dinner, but have a good day, guys.